Hey Rachel, how's it going?
Hey, Gidon. Are we live?
I guess so, yeah.
Okay. Hey guys, welcome to Cider Week, virtual Cider Week, Hudson Valley. Thank you for joining us on this lovely Sunday afternoon. Here with Gidon Coll. He's the owner of Original Sin Cider. We're going to be tasting with Gidon 3 of his single varietal ciders, Macintosh, Fuji, and Northern Spy. Once again, thank you for tuning in. This is really exciting that we're going virtual and online and able to share these tastings and Cider Week Hudson Valley events with you. So I'm just going to start and say, hey, Gidon, welcome. Thank you for tuning in. If you want to just tell us a little bit about yourself and about Original Sin, we'd love to hear also about your Hudson Valley Apple project, and then we'll dive into the tasting. If anyone has any questions, just text in your questions on the live comments, and we will ask Gidon. All right, welcome, Gidon.
Thanks a lot, Rachel. First of all, I want to say to you and Scott that this is amazing. I had the chance to watch a few of the videos that are already online this morning and thoroughly enjoyed them. So I'm just looking forward to the content later in the week. But I think it's really special what you guys are doing. So
cheers to that.
Cheers, cheers to my Northern Spy. So for myself, I started making cider back in 1996. Obviously pretty early in the modern U.S. cider scene. With little resources, I got access to a winery in the Hudson Valley, and I made mixes and then couldn't find a distributor. In those days, no distributor would stock ciders. They thought there was no market for ciders. And I brought a van into New York City and I went bar to bar, mostly through the East Village, developing the early accounts. I did that for quite a long time, and it's amazing to see what the industry has become. Today we're in New York State, has the largest number of cideries in the country, and also to see even nationally what's gone on in the cider industry. I'm one of the few people that's been to every national cider conference. I went to the first one when there's only 40 people attending. I kind of do look back.
You must have.
Oh, sorry?
The stories you must have.
Yeah, no, it's great, and it was very special at those days when it was a very small, close-knit community of people from throughout the country, and obviously it's changed a great deal, and just there's so many passionate people that have got involved. They're taking the industry in so many different directions, and even though per capita cider is still small in the U.S., it's the envy of the world, partially because of the creativity and the energy and enthusiasm that's the case with the current cider industry. So that's kind of the background there. When it comes to my orchard, I have an orchard in the Hudson Valley in Ancrum, New York, in Columbia County. It's an old dairy portion of Columbia County. My family used to have a Holstein dairy farm. Actually, I went to school for dairy farming. 9 years ago, partially influenced by a few Apple events. So if anybody's out there is really interested in Apple centric events, I went to Cider Days for many years and had a big influence on me in Greenfield, Massachusetts, as well as I went to visit the USC Orchards in New York, the largest collection of varieties in the world, up in Geneva, New York, and just going tree to tree and tasting the apples. Once a year they open up the orchard to people to come visit. This year I think it's going to be September 20th, or 19th or 20th. But I was so blown away with the diversity of apples that I decided to plant an orchard on my family's farm, which featured 150 varieties. And to some extent, apples have kind of been lost to history. And there's sort of many definitions of what I'm looking for in apples, but it's been a great experience. And one, learning how to grow cider, apples in general, I quickly learned that growing apples is a science. And if you don't approach it in a very serious way, really bad things happen. So it's been exhilarating learning how to grow apples. And then, seeing the diversity. Every year I probably have 20 or 30 new varieties I've never tried before, but only read about. Many of these varieties are endangered apples. So apples that are being offered, I think the definition of endangered I once saw is apples that are being offered by less than 3 nurseries. And oftentimes I'm only tasting them for the first time when I'm growing them. And that blows my mind every harvest, trying these apples that I'd only read about in publications. So, and there's no doubt that the fact of my interest in apples and enthusiasm really led me to do a single varietal series. I actually did a single varietal series all the way back 10 years ago, which might have been a little early. I did Newtown Pippin, which actually was featured as one of the world's greatest ciders in a book put out in England. And I also did a Northern Spy back then. I think there's much more interest now, along with the growth in the cider category. There's a parallel apple renaissance going on in this country. And I think that there's just so much more intrigue and interest in the different varieties out there and just how they ferment. And so this is like the beginning of what we want to do with single varietals. And the idea is to keep on going and keep on expanding what single varietals we're offering. So that's, a little bit of a nutshell. In each of our cans, this is an example of our Northern Spy can, tells you a little history of the apple in the background. And the history of these apples, once upon a time in our country, when we were an agrarian nation, there was nothing more proud about our society than the fruit that we grew. Apples represent really an integral part of the history of this country, and no more the case than actually in New York State itself. And can I go indulge one more thing, Rachel? Is that okay?
Please. Fascinating.
Because it's Hudson Valley Cider Week, I'm going to talk about two things real quickly. One, this is an original copy of the book called The Fruit Trees of America by Charles and Andrew Downing. This book was written in 1845. This is the original copy. And actually today I'm proud to say I brought this many years ago. And actually Charles Downing signed this book inside, one of the brothers. But it is the most impactful book in the later part of the 19th century when it came to influencing what apples people grew and also about horticulture, how people grew apples. And these guys they grew up in Newburgh, New York. To history of apples in America. The other thing to talk briefly about is one of the great orchardists in the early days was Robert Pell, who I believe was a Harvard-educated orchardist who had a large commercial orchard in Esopus, New York, and he grew Newtown Pippins. He was an exceptional orchardist. When most people had problems with Newtown Pippins being biennial, he carefully pruned them that they're produced every year, and he hand-wrapped his best only sent the best Newtown Pippins to England and hand-wrapped them, shipped them to England. England went so crazy for Robert Pell's Newtown Pippin that they referred to him as the Apple King, and he was highly thought of in England. And a huge export trade arose where the Newtown Pippin would sell for 3 times the price of the common American apple in the Liverpool markets. And once again, this is all coming from the Hudson Valley.
So we have some pretty famous apples here. Wow.
Yeah, we have a great deal of famous apples in New York, and that's just the tip of the iceberg. You want to expand beyond Hudson Valley, just how impactful New York State specifically was to the history of apples in this country. So let's see, if we want to talk about these 3 ciders, we will start with our single varietal Northern Spy. Now, one thing you have to realize about New York State, and one thing we're very fortunate about, is New York State has the most diverse selection of apples in the country, and that really lends itself to making higher quality cider. There is sort of an issue that many of these apples are not cider apples, and they've been planted over the last many years, and certainly Cornell University, led by Greg Peck, is making a big effort to educate orchardists into what cider apples are going to do best in this environment. And he's testing currently a lot of English and Spanish ciders as well as apple varieties from other parts of the country. But we are very fortunate that we have a lot of these heirloom apples, which provide you a much more complex cider than what is available through the typical store-bought apples in this country. So I'm going to go a little more about the apples, but today, 12 apples represent 88% of apples grown in this country, and the average American's only had 6 varieties of apple in their lifetime, but there are over 7,500 varieties of apples. So let's go back to the Newtown Pippin. The Newtown Pippin originates in 1800. Around 1800 on Haman Chapin's orchard in East Bloomfield, New York. If anybody ever visits East Bloomfield, it's about 50 miles from Rochester. And as you enter the town, there's a sign that says proudly, East Bloomfield is the home of the Northern Spy apple. If you go to Boughton Road, I believe, there's a plaque which commemorates the exact spot of the Northern Spy apple. The Northern Spy apple, so it originates on a seedling orchard. By 1840, its popularity is confined to the region. But in 1852, the apple has a major break when the American Pomological Society features the Northern Spy as one of 32 apples worthy of propagation. And by the 1900s, it was the 3rd most popular apple in this country. Unfortunately, it's not. There's some characteristics that make it less than a commercial variety today. One, trees are very slow to produce apples, and secondly, the apples bruise very easily. So that's why today the apple can find the greatest quantities in New York State and Michigan. But guys, I'll try the Northern Spy with you. What you're getting, this is the driest of the 3 varieties. We're doing these are an unfiltered series. Partially the reason I did an unfiltered series, I think it would add a little complexity to these apples, and I think it would make it a little more conducive to a larger market. We fermented dryness with champagne yeast, and then we back sweeten with fresh Northern Spy apples with a very specific apple. I think one of the nice things we hear about these varieties is that you really taste the apple, partially because we're back sweetening with fresh juice. But the Northern Spy of the apples in New York State, one thing that makes it really special is nice and zesty. You can see the unfiltered nature of the cider. And it actually has some tannins, which is not going to be so easy to get in apples that are commonly grown in the state. So it's really, and also the Northern Spy is known as a great eating apple, also a great pie apple. Oftentimes it refers to Northern Pie, as well as an apple which is very well respected for cider. So once again, it's an heirloom apple which people are using for cider and finding that it does extremely well. One big advantage for us when finding apples in the U.S. that are good and good for cider is that these are apples that naturally do well in our environment. And I think one of the things that people are learning when they plant English cider apples in this country is that those apples, because they're used to different weather and soil, don't necessarily prosper in this country. I don't necessarily have the same qualities in this country. So it's definitely advantageous for this U.S. There's obviously many angles the industry is going, but we shouldn't forget the value and importance of these old heirloom apples. So that's my Northern Spy.
Here.
I'm gonna get drunk on the. I'm gonna get drunk.
Do it.
All right. Next, we're going to the Macintosh. All right. Here's our Macintosh label. No, I'm losing too much to get ready. So that's our Macintosh. The Macintosh actually is an apple that originates in Canada. In 1811, John Macintosh found a group of seedling varieties near his home. He transplanted them by his house. One of the apples developed the Macintosh apple. He thought so highly of it, they started giving seeds out to his neighbors, only to find out that a seed of any one specific apple does not produce that apple, because the seed of that apple is genetically half the mother tree and half wherever the cross-pollination came from. So only in the 1830s did someone teach his family the process of grafting, and his son Alan Macintosh was very instrumental in making the apple a popular apple in that region where it still is today, as well as throughout New England. One of the great things about the Macintosh apple is that it's extremely cold hardy, and one of the reasons it was become so popular in this region was partially from a cold freeze in 1933, 1934. All of New England was known as the Baldwin Belt, and even New York, a very large portion of apples grown in New England, in New York before 1933, were Baldwin apples. But a freeze occurred in that year, wiped out almost the whole population of Baldwin apples. And nurserymen went to orchardists and recommended a cold hardy apple from Canada called the Macintosh. And that's one of the reasons you see it so pervasively these days in this region. The Mac is another apple with great aromatics. It has really good acidity. And once again, it's just a very, very high quality apple for cider. It doesn't necessarily have the tannins that the Northern Spy, maybe the zestiness that the Northern Spy has, but certainly a very high quality apple that can make high level ciders for people looking for common apples readily available in certain parts of this country. Today, it's grown in largest quantity, New York, Michigan, Ontario, Canada, and parts of New England. So that's a little bit, and actually we won last year. The largest cider competition in the country every year is Glencap in the Great Lakes Cider Competition in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And last year, our Macintosh won a gold medal there. So, and no Northern Spy. Unfortunately, this year's contest got canceled because of COVID. And I hope everyone's, by the way, safe and doing well. But we believe our Northern Spy is pretty awesome too. If you guys get a chance to try Northern Spy, I think very highly of it, and it's a really great cider. So
you see it.
Oh, sorry.
If you see it anywhere, buy it.
Yeah, we're actually sold out of the Northern Spy already. The Macintosh is it is a hard apple to get in New York State these days in quantity. The Macintosh is a little easier, so we can produce the Macintosh numerous times a year. We only produce the Northern Spy one time a year. So,
Well, I think it's really fascinating and amazing that you do single varietals. It really teaches like the drinker and the consumer, about profiles of these different apples, and it's really it's really important to the cider drinker to learn and understand the differences of the apples. That's awesome.
And even on that note, that maybe is a little controversial to some extent, the idea of making single varietals, because there's the idea that a larger mix of apples make a more unique cider. Mm-hmm. But I've found that going back, once again, doing some research, going back to the 19th century, you see on menus in restaurants single varietal ciders being offered. So there's really quite a long tradition of people making single varietal ciders in this country. So
awesome. I have a quick question from Eric Peter. Yeah. She's tuning in, and she's asking, what qualities do you like about champagne yeast for the Newtown SV cider? Okay.
The champagne yeast, I might be a little old school, and certainly the one great thing about this industry is people going in multitude of different directions. But it's said that the one nice thing about champagne yeast is it ferments effectively to dryness and really allows the apple quality to come out. So for a single variety, when you want the apple to speak for itself, it really is a perfect yeast to use for that purpose. So
awesome. Thank you. Very cool. All right, we have the Fuji coming up next.
Okay, the Fuji's next. Now, the Fuji is obviously a little more of a mass market apple. It's more of a modern apple. It originates in Japan in the 1930s. I think it was released in the early 1960s. Half the apples grown in Japan today are Fuji apples. Over 70% of the apples grown in China today are Fuji apples. So it's an apple that's quite significant globally. One kind of cool thing about the Fuji is it said that the French ambassador to the U.S. in the 1790s gave a piece of sign wood to Thomas Jefferson, which was an apple called Royals Gannett. He ended up giving to a nursery in Virginia. That Royals Gannett ended up making it way to Japan. And the Fuji is a cross between the Royals Gannett and the Red Delicious. And as such, it's often joked that Thomas Jefferson is the founding father of our country and the grandfather of the Fuji, because of his Royals Gannett that the Fuji exists today. But one of the reasons we made it, we actually do export to Japan. There's a huge burgeoning cider industry in Japan, and they feel compromised. I mean, we feel compromised too, because we, compared to England, where they have an unquestioned a huge amount of cider apples available. Some of the Japanese cider makers feel that because the Fuji is in such large quantity, they aren't necessarily able to make as good quality cider for that reason. The Fuji historically doesn't have a lot of acid to it. This Fuji actually, we add a little more sweetness to the end of it, but there is actually a nice amount of acid to the Fuji apples we get. And we sent some to Japan, and they really thoroughly enjoyed our Fuji cider. But actually, everyone should be on the lookout, or if you can follow online, just the level of enthusiasm that's going on in Japan currently for cider. And it's really happening globally. And, part of the reason really is because of National Cider Conference in America. A lot of people from other countries are coming to the National Cider Conference, are really being blown away with the youth, not me, other people, obviously, and energy of our community, and going back and taking that energy into developing their own communities as well. But I'm not saying that the national cider industry is the only reason, but there's definitely something going on globally when it comes to resurgence and interest in cider and making more diverse, interesting products. So it's going to be fun over the next while to see how the industry continues to grow.
That's amazing. Well, no doubt you have a part in that. So thank you for that. Because cider is my drink of choice. So thank you for that. That's awesome. Very cool. Yeah. Do you, so your Hudson Valley Apple project, do you want to talk a little bit more about that? And is that something that people can come and experience or?
Yeah, everyone's welcome to come. So we grow anything, the more diverse and unique the apple, the better. We grow an apple called the Pitmaster pineapple, which says it supposedly tastes like a pineapple. We grow Hudson's, it's an apple from England. We grow an apple called Hudson's, it does really well on our land as well. We grow a Hudson's Golden Gem, which is an apple from Oregon, which is first believed to be a pear and tastes like a pear, and it's an awesome apple. We grow an apple that tastes like a strawberry, and the idea is really to show people just how incredibly diverse apples can be. We grow an apple that looks like a star from Switzerland called Epietiole. an apple that's really conical from Turkey. And honestly, the weirder the better. So it's just been awesome. Like every which way, it's been great. And we also have a small. We just a little more diversity. We grow 24 varieties of russets. Russets tend to be a little more richer in flavor. If anybody goes out to farmers markets and sees a russet, it's stuff. As a rule, I would say they're worth trying. We grow 14 varieties of Cox Orange Pippin offspring. Cox Orange Pippin is considered to be the greatest eating apple, oftentimes called the greatest eating apple of England. And so we grow a lot of the offspring. And then we have whole rows of cider apples. We grow a bunch of U.S. old cider apples, include Harrison, which is it was said the best cider in this country is made in Newark, New Jersey. And so we grow 2 Newark, New Jersey apples. We also cider apples. We also grow Thomas Jefferson's favorite cider apple that's still around called the Hughes Virginia Crab, as well as his 2 favorite eating apples. One is at Soap at Spitzenberg and Newtown Pippin, which both are from New York. So like it's awesome. And we also have a small seedling project. We're trying to breed our own apples. And then a little bit, I kind of skipped over this, but my little haven here, this little apartment, is filled with hundreds of books about apples and also old nostalgia about the industry because it's so fascinating. 1805 to 1905 is called the golden age of pomology, where literally our country was obsessed with the almighty apple. So I kind of I hunt antique stores all over this country trying to show proof that this actually is the case. So here's an old, you might not be able to see it there. This is an old Northern Spy stencil, which was used to mark crates. And I have about 75 different varieties of stencils. This is a Macintosh stencil.
Amazing.
And then here's actually a trophy of the best Macintoshes grown in actually Wisconsin at the state fair. In the old days, they used to go horticulture. State fairs are really big in terms of promoting apple varieties. And once again, it was obviously a much bigger deal in the days when our agricultural offerings were not so monolithic like they are today. So that's kind of it. So that all fascinates me. It's a lot of fun. I also have quite an extensive collection of nursery catalogs here, and everything you can imagine. Anything about the apple. It's a little bit of a.
I have a question. When are you opening up the Palm Museum? When is officially opening your Apple Museum? And
yeah, I would like to open it up.
And
well, I honestly thought about that. The only problem is where our family's dairy farm is such a quiet, is in Ancrum, New York. If anybody's familiar with it, it is a very quiet part of upstate. I'd love to do it there at one point. And then about the orchard, anyone's is happy, please come visit. Probably the peak time, like the USDA orchards, is the time they open up is the 3rd week of September. Probably the peak time in terms of the greatest variety of apples being ripe would probably be about the 3rd or 4th week in September. So if anybody wants to visit, they can contact me and I'd be happy to show them around. Just to be clear to everybody, this is a 2-acre orchard. So it's not a massive size orchard, but it's more unique in its diversity. So.
Awesome. That's amazing. Okay. I feel like I just read an entire history book of apples and cider. This has been amazing, Gidon. Like absolutely amazing. You are an absolute wealth of knowledge. And I encourage everybody and anybody to seek Gidon out. Go visit him on his orchard in Hudson Valley and try and get into that apartment because I would love to walk around that apartment and touch all the memorabilia. This has been amazing. If anyone else has any questions, I'm sure we can contact you. Is there like an email or through your website?
Yeah, through our website, I'll respond right away. So.
Okay, yeah, and definitely, this has been really great. Is there anything else you want to add?
No, just that I'm really looking forward. I really think this is special what you guys are doing, and you only realize now that the upside for having a virtual Cider Week, in terms of being able to be able to download these events at any time, and it's obviously to be an honor to be a part of it. So.
Okay, well, I wanted to thank you, Gidon. Thank you for coming and being part of it. And I wanted to thank everyone for tuning in. We have a lot more beautiful cider tastings coming up this week. Check out our event calendar on ciderweekhv.com. Registration is free. The viewing links are out there. Just tune in and spread the word. We do really have a robust calendar of events coming up until next Sunday, the 28th. And I hope to see you guys. And Gidon, thank you once again. There's also links on our Hudson Valley Cider Week website to buy these ciders, to find these ciders, really support our Hudson Valley cider makers these days. And once again, thank you guys so much. We have so much more coming up this week. And thank you for tuning in. Thank you so much, Gidon. And cheers to Cider Week, guys.
Yeah, thanks.
Cheers, man.
Bye.
All right. Bye, guys. See you soon.
Yep. Be good.